Okay, so let's take a look through the TouchDesigner composition and see what's going on in here. So we'll start over on the left here, and this is how we create the data to make the composition audio reactive. So to go in order, there's like this one on the left over here. This is a node that just lets you stick in an audio file and play it into the composition. There's this one, which turns it into an audio spectrum, or I don't know if it's spect because it's spectrometer, but this gives you a different way of visualizing the same data. This device right here, this is how we have the audio come out to like our headphones so we can listen to it while we're playing it in the composition. This here, we're combining the two channels into one channel, and then we have all of these nodes that say null on here just to make it so that if you make a bunch of changes to what's going into this, you don't have to change the reference to this node in all of the other nodes that it's being sent to. Down here, this is selecting just one of the two channels, and this is going into the good old audio analysis tool, which is built in with TouchDesigner. This just is, again, it's examining the spectrum, basically, of the audio file that's going into it. You can turn each of these things on and off and tell it whether to look for these. But basically, this gives you an easy way of getting data from your audio. So this is set to like certain frequency ranges to look for a kick and a snare. And those are the only two that we're using here. And then, you know, when this data comes out of the audio analysis tool, some of the stuff is just like 0 or 1, it's like on or off. So in order to give that more of a curve and more like a, for it to bring the value up and then kind of more slowly come down instead of just on and off, we have another node called the envelope, which you can set all of the different settings on it, and similar to like pinging an envelope in like a synthesizer or something, whenever it gets that signal hitting it, it's going to, instead of just a straight up on and off 0 or 1, it's going to pop up to whatever number we want it to. In this case, I think it's just 1, and then it's going to a little more slowly go back down. So like if you think of that, for example, one of the things the kick is controlling in this composition is a light. It's changing the intensity of one of the lights in the 3D scene. So instead of the light just going boop, boop, on, off, we instead have it kind of like go up real quick and then fade down each time the kick goes off. So same thing with the snare. The snare is a little bit snappier of an envelope because we want the snare, the effects of the snare being detected to be quicker and happen more rapidly. If there's multiple snares in a row, we don't want it to just stay on. We want it to snap up and down and up and down. So we'll look at what those are doing next. Actually, they're going quite a few different places. So one of the things that's happening, like I said, with the kick, the information from the kick is this right here, where we have the dimmer. This is the dimmer for this light in the 3D scene. And you can see every time the kick goes off, it's popping that up and then it goes back down. So that becomes like an automatic reaction that this has to that sound. One One of the other ways to use this type of signal is to take a, this is a node called count, and what we can do is set a certain number that it's going to count to. And I think in here, yeah. So we're going to have it count up, and then I'm going to multiply that by a certain number with this math node. So and to explain why we're doing this, basically, I want to have the camera, which is right here. There's the Z, or yes, the Z rotation, which is this number over here. The Z rotation is, yeah, the Z rotation is, basically I want it to stay between 0 and 360. So even though you can have rotation over and under 360, it just kind of loops back around. For this, I just wanted it to stay within that range. So in our count and math nodes, this is how we're making it so that every time the kick hits, it's basically adding 30 degrees to this camera rotation. So if you watch how this goes up, every time the kick hits, it's adding basically 30 degrees to that rotation. So that gives us a little bit more movement in the composition. So you can see here actually what that's doing on the camera. So like every time, yeah, I guess it wasn't hitting for a minute, but yeah, every time it hits, you can see the axes, red, green, and blue. You can see those kind of spinning around every time the kick is hitting. So that's one of the things that is reactive. We also have, so then we have some geometry over here. This is just a torus shape, or the donut basically. And we create this basic shape and then we send it in to this transform node. And we have a couple of things that are also controlled by the envelope of the snare. So we have that snare value going in here. You can see it kind of jumping every time the snare goes off. This attribute create just creates some attributes related to, I think, this tangents thing, so that we can apply more modifications and stuff later. I don't totally I'll be honest, I don't totally know what that's for, but basically it's so that we can apply you know, the material and modifications to that geometry later in this geo node. This is one of the basic shapes. This shape here is, you can see, is sort of like this little arc of rings that's happening here, and you can see them bouncing. That corresponds to when the snare's hitting. And then the texture, like you can see over here, the donut is just a smooth donut. And then when we come over here, it's this kind of like scratchy, spiky little donut. And also there's more of them. So the scratchy spikiness is coming from this right here. This is the material that is basically how we're going to render the geometry. So this is, think of this as like the skin of the geometry once we get to this node. And what this is being fed by is actually what we skipped over earlier, which is over here. So you can see this texture that's happening right here. This is like a spectrograph, basically, if you've seen that in music production or whatever, this corresponds to what's happening in the sound. So the way we get that to happen is we basically take, remember we mentioned over here, we mentioned this audio spectrum node, which is making this. And what we do is we take from this type of node, which is called a chop or channel operator, we turn that into this, which is a node called chop to top. And this turns it into, I'm sorry, what is this? Yeah, chop to top. So top is topology operator, I think. So this is just making like a single pixel high representation of each of these values. So like when it hits the very top, it would be like a white pixel. If it's anywhere in between, it's going to be either transparent or, you know, gray or something like that. So then we increase that level a little bit, like we brighten it up by using this node, the level node. Then we go fit down here, and this basically pushes that down to the bottom area of a square, a square. And then we can take that and basically use the feedback node to say, okay, this goes here, and it's also going here, and the transform is telling it that every certain amount of time, we're going to scoot the whole thing upwards just a little bit, and we can change the speed of that to whatever we want. And every time we move this little line upwards, we want to maintain the data that's not live, like the data that happened just a second ago. So every time it moves up, it's going to add that new line at the bottom and then push all the other lines up towards the top. So that's what we're using this feedback node for. So that the stuff that's in the past doesn't disappear. It keeps moving up the screen in order. Then we just have a couple of things over here to add black to the background so it's not transparent anymore. We've got another null array, and then so this right here, this is like sort of the finished spectrograph image. This ends up being fed into these different material nodes. So over here, yeah, null 4. And we're using this as like a normal map and a height map on this skin. And we're changing around like, okay, this one we only want it to be protruding like a little bit. This other one which is a different geometric object in the composition. This one is way spikier, like it's more pronounced. The height map is a lot more pronounced in this one, so it's more exaggerated. And then down here, it's super exaggerated, and the geometry that we're applying it to is a lot larger. Like in the scene, it's much larger. And to kind of explain what each of these 3 geo nodes is doing in the scene, this one down here that looks like just giant, insane triangle world, that is mostly making up. And let's try to see what it actually looks like at the render node. So that one at the bottom, that one is making a big giant spiky donut that's usually in the background, but is so large that sometimes it takes over the scene and kind of covers the other elements. This other one, the middle geo node, which is this one. This is a single ring, or another torus donut thing. And that is, if you're looking at this composition, you can kind of see it on its own. It's the larger ring that keeps going in and out into the foreground and into the background. You can see that. And then the other part, which you can see in the composition, is the little half arc, the little ring of rings. And that is fed by this over here. And the way that we get more than one of these objects showing up in the scene, when really there only is one of these geometric objects, the way we turn that into like an arc, for example, or it could be anything really, is we create another piece of geometry. This is the circle node, but it's set to an open arc shape instead of a full circle. And then we choose how many divisions there are, which is going to determine how many points are actually in the node. And then we transform that so we can make that move as well. But basically, at each one of the points of this circle geometry here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actually. There's 6 divisions, so that makes 7 points. Basically, at each one of those points, we're going to be creating a copy of this donut up here. And that's how we end up with this arc of little rings here, is by saying, hey, at every point on that second piece of geometry, we want this first piece of geometry to appear as an instance right there. And that is done by, in this window here, going to instance and then dragging this into these different operator slots. So you can see all of this kind of working together, those kind of 3 different elements of geometry happening all at the same time here. And then from there, so we have that. We have a little bit of movement of the light as well. I have that second light is actually moving a little bit according to when the kick drum hits. And then to kind of finish things off and just give it the look that we want, it goes from here, which I don't know if you can see at this size, but it's kind of clean here. And instead of just leaving it like that, we want to do a little bit of processing to it. So one of the things that looks good to me anyway is this node right here called limit. And you can limit a couple of different things. You can basically limit the values, which are like the color values or brightness value, all that kind of value. And you can also quantize the position, you can quantize the values of the pixels and you can quantize the position. Quantizing the value is how we get this, like, there aren't really any gradients in this image anymore. If we compare it to this, there's a lot of gradients, like it goes from medium gray to a little bit lighter gray and back again. Instead, when we apply this, basically what we end up with is like a less detailed gradient. So we only have maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 shades of gray instead of a million different shades of gray. And that gives it a little bit more of like a old-timey PlayStation 1 rendering type of look to it. So we're doing that. We're giving it a tiny bit of position quantizing, which basically is like pixelating it when you're using it this way. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then over here, we have another fit. That's not that interesting. And then one of the things that usually ends up looking nice is kind of decreasing the detail or the color information of the scene, and then adding a really like high detail filter on top of it that does have that range of gradient. So we're taking this like kind of color wise at least undetailed image and then putting it through this this bloom node, which is taking, anytime there's like a big white area, it's creating a glowy kind of area around it. It's blooming. It's blooming. So I don't know. That's an effect I like. I like how that ended up looking. And that is it. Then we just go over here. This is our last null, and then we have a movie file out, which is how we record the composition. I also record it with the audio so that it maintains the synchronization between the sound and the audio reactive stuff. So that is the TouchDesigner side. So for the Ableton part of this, which we're doing the music first, recording a chunk, and then bringing that into TouchDesigner. So this is happening separately from the TouchDesigner stuff. This is a Ableton Live project where we've got just a few variations of breaks here. This is the main one it's based off of, which is just sliced all in a row, so it plays back just like it does in the original clip. Then we take that, and in another clip, we select all of that stuff that was in the right order, and then we use this, I wanted to get this guy's name, it's one of these tools, MIDI tools by Philip Meyer, where it lets you select like all of the notes in this roll, piano roll here, and then take them and turn them into basically like take chunks of that series of notes and then move them around in different ways. So like we have like if we had a chunk of like 3 or 4 notes at the beginning, which represent the different slices of the break, we can tell it to move those around to another part in this piano roll here, and that randomizing that enough times gives you something to kind of go off of, and then you can clean it up and move things around that don't sound good. But it's a nice way to, like, this is like a Ned Rush technique where you take the sliced break, grab those chunks, and then scoot them all around using this like slice shuffler thing. I think he's got a new version of this too on his website, but this is the one that came with Live Suite, I think. But yeah, it's a nice tool. I'm probably gonna buy the fancier version of it. Also, all of these pre-made variations of this break that I made, all of them are set in the clip settings. If you go to the follow action and you turn this on, instead of the clip just looping on itself until you select a different clip, if you have this follow action turned on, you can change this to something else. So right now, all of these are just set to next. So it's playing through these in a set order, but it's also cool. You can choose other stuff like other or any, and it will just randomly pick another clip from that list to play next. So as soon as it plays this the number of times that you told it to, it will skip to a different clip. And this again is just playing through in a straight line. So yeah, so basically every time it's going to play through all of the clips in this list. One of the things that I did to kind of break that up a little bit, they're kind of nuts sounding anyway, but just so that it doesn't sound like a total loop of these different breaks, we also have on this whole channel, we have a beat repeat happening, which is when you hear the kick drum going like at the beginning of a section or whatever, just because that's where it usually happens to fall, is at the beginning here. That's this beat repeat going off. And the way that we keep that from being predictable or just going off every bar or 2 bars or whatever it is, is we set the interval at two bars, but then instead of just setting the chance to a certain number, we created an LFO over here, and the LFO is at a rate of like 1/2 going along with the beat. So the waveform of this LFO is the binary waveform, which is just going to be either at 100% or 0%. And that way we get a little bit more variation of like when the beat repeat is actually going to hit. So that's just another way of like switching it up a little bit, because during performing this, we're going to be basically fully focused on the melodic part, which is the Metropolix Solo controlling these 2 channels here. This one is the bass, and to keep a little bit of variation going in that, it actually is, we've got an LFO here, which has a long interval. I think this is like the longest interval you can set it to. It's a sine wave that's slowly going from 100% down to 0 and then back up. And what that is controlling is actually crossfading between these 2 different instruments in the rack. So one of them is this like kind of round, warmer sounding like kalimba sound. And then the other one, this bass grinder one, is it's a wavetable that's more like grindy, gritty, kind of higher pitched or sharper sounding, so that, you know, we're still playing the same notes from the Metropolix into this channel, but it's kind of slowly fading between actually 2 totally different instruments. And then over here, then we have this wind lead, and this, we're not really doing anything to this. We're kind of keeping this pretty standard throughout the song. So we'll take a look at the Metropolix and how that feeds into this too. Okay, and to explain the Metropolix portion of this, which is a little sequencer that was originally for Eurorack modular systems, but has a version now that comes in a little case like that, and can do either regular DIN MIDI out and USB MIDI in and out. This is what I did the sequencing for the melodic parts on, and Basically, the way that this is set up is there are two channels of pitch and gate out. And you can have it so that both channels are going through the same sequence of pitches. You set the pitches using these sliders here up at the top. And then basically it will run through these in order. There are ways you can change the order. You can have it go backwards. You can have it ping pong between the ends so that you can have sequences that are more than just 8 steps long. There's also down here, you have the pulse count. So this is how many steps basically is the sequencer going to stay on this particular step before it moves on to the next one. So you could have one that's like, here, this one is two pulses. I'm sorry, I should say pulses. 2 pulses long. The next one is 8 pulses long. So this one will be pretty quick, and the next one will stay longer. And then below each of these pulse count switches, and actually the guy who designed the original Metropolix, or the RYK, whatever it's called, which is what the Metropolix is based on, he was at some Asian tech market, and he found this 8-way sliding switch, and that was the basis for designing the entire sequencer. So anyway, down here we have another switch which selects the gate type. So let's say this step was set to 4 pulses, right? So if it's on the bottom one, this is just like a rest or a blank. So it's not going to play any note if you have it on the bottom setting. The next one with just 1 dot is it will gate open for 1 pulse at the beginning, and then if it's 4 pulses long, it will play for 1 pulse, and then 3 of the next pulses will be silent. The next one up is it will play a gate on every single one of the pulses. So if it was set on 4, it'd be dit, 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 dit. The top one is just a solid gate, which is like tying all the pulses together. So it would be, it would open the gate for 4 pulses. And then basically you set all of that information for every one of these steps. So the cool thing, well, there's a lot of cool things about this. This is a really, really interesting sequencer, but one of the cool things is it isn't just one pitch and gate out. It has 2 pitch and gate outs, but it only has one sequencer. It only really has this one set of pitch and pulse and gate controls. So what it lets you do is, let's say, let's just call it A and B. So channel A might just play straight through this series of pitches and then reset every certain number of pulses. Channel B, which is in the composition we're talking about, that's the bass. That can be set to play maybe every other pulse, and it can also be set to play slower. So like maybe the bass line, you want to change pitches only every, for every 1 time, or for every 2 times you change the main melody's pitch or go to the next step. Maybe you only want it to move 1 step for the bass line. So you can set all of those parameters independently between the 2 channels, and then that's how you end up with an interesting, like two different pitch sequences that are related to each other, because technically they're playing notes from the same series of pitches. What you can also do is break this sequence of 8 into 2 sections if you want to. So you could tell it, like for channel A, what I did in this patch is I told it to play 1 through 5 looping and to skip 6, 7, and 8. So 6, 7, and 8 do not play out of channel A at all. And then I told channel B to only play 6, 7, and 8. So that's one way that you can basically split this into two sequencers. So I didn't need as many different pitches for the bass line. So 3 different ones was fine. Basically then I have 3 pitch controls and 3 pulse controls and 3 gate controls that are only relating to what's happening on the bass line. And then the 1 through 5 are only going to come out of channel A for the lead. There's different ways you can set up the controls on this. It has a nice little screen so you can kind of see what's going on. These control knobs over here, control 1 and control 2, these can be assigned to like almost anything in here, but a nice way to get some variation in there is to say this is control 1 on mine. I'll just tell you how I have it set up. Control 1 is set to a parameter called pitch pre. And in the menu in here, what pitch pre means is it's you're adjusting the pitch pre-quantizer. And we're talking about pitch quantizing here. So when we have a scale selected, like I'm always in like whatever, minor pentatonic or something like that usually. Basically, you're adjusting the pitch of the overall what's coming out of this channel, out of channel A, just adjusting it by a certain number of steps when you turn this knob. So instead of like it playing through the regular pitch here, set of pitches, it plays every one of those pitches with the adjustment of whether you turned this up or down. So however many steps you've turned it above 0, which is in the middle, then you basically, you're getting that pitch out. So that lets you adjust that on the fly and kind of noodle around with it and make sure that that's happening pre-quantizer so that what ends up coming out is still within the scale that you're trying to work in for the song. Control 2, I have mapped to a little bit of a simpler version of that same thing, where instead of adjusting the pitch by like 1 step or whatever, the control 2 is related to the bass line, and that is just a straight up octave shift. So I can shift up the bass line by like 1 octave, 2 octaves. If I want to flip them, sometimes like I'll pop the bass line up like 3 octaves and then drive the main lead pitch sequence down so that it kind of like invert them for a minute and then bring them back. There's some other cool features. This does so many things. I'm not going to get through all of them, but even these little knobs, these are called attenuverters, which you would need if you were using this in like a modular environment. But you can also set these. These also can act within the interface as, with nothing plugged into them, they can act as a simple like yes or no or on or off, depending if you've turned it to the right or to the left, because it can detect whether the voltage is inverted or not, even if there's nothing plugged in. So like X, I have that set to just basically, it's like a very simple, hey, take the pitch sequence of channel A and just play it backwards. So if I turn it to the left, it's going to play backwards instead of forwards, which just gives you a quick way to put a variation in there. And then Y is set to basically do the same thing to channel B, which would be the bass line. So if I turn Y to the left, it's going to play the bass line sequence backwards instead for a little bit until I turn it back. Z, I can't remember what that does anymore. But yeah, so that's basically the layout that I had going on here. It's just it's a nice sequencer because it lets you noodle around and kind of leave things coming out on pitch as long as you have the quantizing stuff set up correctly.
TouchDesigner.